Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, on one of my recent videos, this guy, Arindam, commented, please suggest a few budget lenses for street photography and landscape. So, that's what I'm going to do today. Now, honestly, there's a ton of high-quality Sony lenses out there, and they can get really expensive really fast. But there are a few that are still great lenses and aren't at that crazy high price range. Now, I'm going to break this up into two categories. One is going to be wide-angle lenses, and the other is going to be mid-range lenses. I feel like generally I use more wide-angle lenses for my landscape photography, but there are times when I do use a mid-range lens, so I thought I'd cover a couple in each category. So this way, depending on what type of lens you're looking for, I hope that this makes it a little bit easier for you to decide. So I'm going to start with wide-angle lenses, and the first lens that I want to talk about is the Zeiss 16-35 f4. And this is kind of in a higher price range, but compared to its counterpart, the 16-35 f2.8, it's much cheaper. Though the price is so much cheaper, it's still a great lens. It produces a super sharp image, and it has that versatile 16-35 focal range, so you can get some more mid-range type shots as well as those wide-angle shots. So it's an all-around great lens. So another lens around this price range is the Laowa 10-18mm. It's an f4.5 to 5.6. This is an all-manual lens, which means that there is no autofocus whatsoever. And one thing I've noticed with all manually focusing lenses is they are super sharp. And I think it's awesome that it's a 10-18mm instead of a fixed one, where it's just one set focal range, so you do get a little bit of zoom here and there. The last wide-angle lens that I want to talk about is the Rokinon 14mm, and this is hands down one of my favorite lenses of all time. I've used it for a little over a year, and I have no complaints whatsoever. The Rokinon 14mm is also a manually focusing lens. The aperture goes to 2.8, and it is a fisheye lens, but it's extremely great for landscape photos, and it's only $250. It's one of my favorites. Alright, now let's move on to some mid-range lenses. So the first mid-range lens that I want to talk about is actually the kit lens that you get with most Sony cameras when you first buy them, and that's the 28-70 f3.5 to 5.6. This is a super great lens, honestly, for very cheap. I've seen it for around $150, sometimes cheaper. So it's a great lens for the price, and it'll definitely get you some really good shots. And because it has such a big focal range, there's a ton of different things that you could do with this. This would be good for landscape, street photography, portraits even. So it just kind of allows for a lot of different types of photography to be taken with it. Next, I want to talk about maybe a step up from the 28-70, which is the Tamron 28-75 f2.8. So it's not Sony brand, but it still yields a really sharp image. This one is $700 to $800, so it's a bit more expensive than the 28-70, but it will definitely yield a better image. But with that focal range, it'll still be useful for all those different types of photography that you want to take. I think it actually has stabilization built in, so it'll be a little bit more stable when taking photos at a lower shutter speed. And the last lens that I wanted to talk about is the Sony 50mm 1.8. And this lens is, honestly, for its price, it is such a good lens. This lens is probably more for portrait photography, kind of stuff like that. And it's not a super versatile lens just because it is that fixed 50mm focal range. I've used this lens a few times, and each time I go and take photos with it, I'm always shocked at how good the images turn out. So this one is another one of my kind of favorite lenses, and honestly, for the price, I think it's totally worth it. But that's pretty much it. Those would be my recommendations. And Arindam, thank you again for the question. So let me know if you guys have any more questions or any topics that you want me to talk about. Just leave a comment down below. But other than that, hopefully you guys have a better idea of what lens you want to get depending on what type of photography you want to focus more on. So anyway, if you're not subscribed yet, please go ahead and push that button, and I will see you in the next video. Later, and thanks for checking this out.